I want people to know more about these characters. Like, I want people to feel these characters, and I want more of me in these characters. And that's really like the important part of me that, like, I don't want people to just see like baseline surface level. I want people to pretty much be like, oh, this person's on the couch with me. Like, I've met this person.
Greetings and welcome to the Creative Writing Wizard podcast, where we talk with published authors and writers about them, their books, and about the writing process. Today I am joined by published author Shaye Wick. Welcome to the podcast, Shaye.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks for asking. Now, for those listening in, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am freshly 24. I live in New Jersey. Big reader, big writer, and that's pretty much it.
Awesome. That's putting yourself quite humbly, I would say, based on the little bit that I've been seeing. Being that you mentioned you're 24, but you already have one book that's been published, and you have another one that's coming out pretty soon here at the time of this recording. That's pretty awesome. What led you into getting into writing?
So I've kind of always been a really, really big reader. Since I was little, it was more like not screens, more books and stuff. And even when I was like in like third grade, fourth grade, I was writing little short stories and was like just enjoying it. And then I kind of lost it in high school, found other hobbies and stuff, coding and things like that. And then I became a front desk receptionist and I just had a little bit of downtime and I started reading again. And I was like, man, like I really miss wanting to write. And I had an idea that came up and I played around with it for a year or so. And then early this year, I just started writing and it just grew into a big thing.
That's awesome. Yeah, and when we were chatting prior to this, the word that you use is that it was like flowing out of you. That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. And because like you said, you started this year, and you have the one out, you have the one coming out, and then I believe there's another one that you're coming out with potentially later this year as well.
Yeah, very excited. Three book series, which is kind of crazy. I didn't really think that like an idea could come like that. It went with one book, and then I was like, oh my goodness, there's a character that I can feed off of. And then I had two other books that I was talking to my husband about, and I was like I just can't stop the words, like I can't stop the ideas. And I was like, honestly, why do I want to? And I just kept writing.
That's awesome. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about your writing process? I was looking into some of your your videos talking about your book. So how does that process look like for you? Like I know that there's quite a range of styles of as people try to write their books. But you seem to have found something that's really worked well for you. So can you talk a little bit about how this book came into being and how you approach that?
So last summer, my husband and I were talking, and I think we had watched The Room, which is kind of an idea that I got off of this book, considering that my main character gets stuck in a room very similar, no windows or anything. And then like I just had a really, I'm like a visual person, so like dreams and stuff were pretty much it was like a movie in my head, where like start to finish, I could see exactly how the book was gonna go down. I think when I was writing it, I had named the chapters like different events that were happening to kind of have that like spatial awareness and then creating the character's background, but there wasn't much like planning going on. It really was just like I could see it. And like when I was writing, I think I wrote 40,000 words in the span of 2 days.
Wow.
And I was like, for 8 hours, like just sitting. And I remember being like, what time is it? Like, what do you mean? Like, it's just like, and then editing it and stuff like it definitely. I think the next one is a lot longer than this one, which I really appreciate because I didn't realize like 40,000 words is only 130 pages, and like I wanted it to be longer, and I feel like I could have added more depth, but I feel like the story is exactly what it was supposed to be.
Hmm. Yeah, and I actually kind of appreciated that. like where you give enough information in the story so that you're emotionally invested in all the characters, but there's definitely no fluff. Like you're right to the point, which in this genre of like the thrill horror kind of vibes, that really keeps you on the edge of your seat. So it went well with this first one, and I'm curious to see how you now take that experience and then taking it into the second book.
Yeah, I definitely wish that I had maybe a little bit more depth on Demi, who's the main character. I feel like I didn't give her enough background. I know some
Hmm.
people were like, well, like, how did she become a waitress? Like, who is this baby? And like, I was like, oh wow, like I didn't even I was so focused on Declan and Demi and their experience together that like I could have probably added more about like why her baby was in the car and like what attracted him to her other than her looks, or like more about their first meeting or something like that.
And now you have the second book coming out pretty soon. At what point did you start writing the second book? And you even have the third book as well coming out later. So can you talk a little bit about, yeah, was it like sequentially? Did you write it all at once? How'd that go about for you?
So I finished the first book, and then I think we came home and I was talking about titles because that was the hardest part for me, honestly. Like being like, I don't know what to name this thing. Like it just exists, and he was like, "Well, find something that like what's the book about? Like what's a main piece of it?" And I was like, "Well, honestly, like he's a realtor. Like that is him, and the series is him with different women." So if I call it the realtor for a series, like, and then each woman's experience is the main title. But yeah, I finished this one and then immediately like I was like I want to write another victim's point of view. And like that day I immediately started writing the second book. And then I was like, well, like how do I publish this? Like how do I get this out? Like I'm just writing these books and they're about to sit in a computer. I gave it to a few friends who loved it. And then I like searched and I was like, well, how do you self-publish? And the fact that it really was like just a few clicks, like really you just have to submit it and hope that somebody reads it. And I was like, I could do that, right? Like it's like hitting post on Instagram or like hopefully, right? And it's been good so far.
Yeah, can you talk a bit about that? So, you've had you've built up a bit of a social following on TikTok and Instagram. How have you found the reception being to the book, and now that you're a published author?
Yeah, the second I got the emails from Apple Books and Amazon saying like, "Hey, you're like published," I feel like I was so excited. I immediately changed all my bios to author. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I can say this." I sent it in my family group chats. I was freaking out. That was really cool. My social media has mainly come from my husband. He does lip syncing and stuff, and then our content was mostly couple stuff. And going from couple content to I'm a thriller writer has been a little bit odd because how do I go from like, oh, I love my husband to all of a sudden like a POV from a serial killer? So I definitely like got a decent amount of downloads from the people that support us, which was really nice. But it definitely has been different going from like vlogging a date to like here's a book and this is why you should read it because when I read books, I'm normally going to like the thrift store or the library and the back of the book catches me. So like downloading something, like I was like, I haven't seen book ads. Like how do I bring that into it? So that's been different. It's definitely different. A lot of trial and error, but I've definitely had a few videos hit the tens of thousands, which has been nice.
Wow.
Yeah, but and hitting a lot of like communities like psychological thrillers on Facebook or Reddit and just like talking to other self-published authors has been really, really cool.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome, and it definitely did surprise me a little bit when I started reading the book, because I'd seen a few of your posts on socials, and the vibe I would say is very different, very very distinct, which is it's really well done within the genre. I guess the question for you though is, how do you go about writing something that's a little bit more on the thriller, maybe the horror, darker side. Like you mentioned, this is a first person perspective, from the the villain or the antagonist perspective as well as the protagonist. how do you go about writing from that perspective?
Honestly, it's definitely a little bit weird. I've always been a fan of dark characters, movies and stuff. My stepdad, when I met him, was like a really big like Scream and like the Boogeyman. Like he loved horror movies. So by the time I was 7 and my mom married him, I was like watching that stuff that I probably shouldn't have been watching. But there was always an interest in like, why does this person want to do this? Like, how do you? And then documentaries and stuff. Like, so writing it was definitely the ending was probably the hardest part with like everything that she does to like halfway and over. Like that was hard. There were times that like I definitely sat back and I was like, this is like a lot. Like I'm like doing a lot right now. Like how do I? And I was trying to do it tastefully because there are serious topics that she goes through, and like I can only imagine like I'm not a mom. Like I'm not, but I am an animal owner, and I am like, so it was hard. There were definitely some moments where I had to like sit back and be like, this is not fun. But reading it back, I was like, this is like she's surviving. Like she is doing everything in her power, and that's what I hope I would do. That's what I hope others would do. And I didn't want her to be judged for it. Like, you're doing what you can. But it was definitely like taking moments back and like speaking it out. And like, even my grandmother, because this poor lady, she was like, this is some harsh material. And I was like, yeah, like, sorry.
Yeah, it definitely hits hard in a good way, I think, or at least it sets the tone fairly well of like what would a person do in this situation? Like what's the length and when would that thing happen and like how would that affect you psychologically? Um, yeah, like it was really intense, especially near the end. And I think the thing that kind of popped into my head is I don't know if you've watched much of like Criminal Minds.
I love Criminal Minds.
Oh, okay, awesome. Because
Yeah.
I can see that coming through in a way of like, it reminded me of when I watched Criminal Minds and how they go into like what is the killer thinking, what is the the antagonist thinking, and why are they doing that? Which yeah, I mean, definitely creeped me out a little bit. I've said previously on the podcast that I'm a bit of a horror wuss, but I appreciate the authors and I want to support where I can. So I kind of like read with one hand over my eyes, but yeah, I guess so you've written now 3 books, like so you have one coming out later this year as well.
And then I'm halfway through the third one. So I haven't
Okay.
finished it yet, but I am almost done it. I'm definitely at a point where like I can see where the story goes. It's really just sitting down in front of a computer and letting it flow. Trying not to put too much pressure on myself because I feel like 2 books in a year is already great. So I'm like, even if it doesn't come out this year, like it's not the worst thing.
Totally. Yeah. What have you found that's working well? So like you mentioned that you have like a picture in your head and then you sit down and you let the words flow out of you. What tricks or what tips have you found that have worked well for getting this page or getting this writing onto the page?
Just really like focusing on the fact that like it isn't like there's days where I don't want to write. And I try not to beat myself up about it because I like to set my own deadlines and I'm like, oh, well, the first one I wrote in 2 weeks. But like that's not a realistic timeline for me to do for every book. I've been thinking about the book for over a year. So I had a year of mental planning that I didn't really put into account. Like, yeah, it took 2 weeks to put the pages out, but so really just like not putting anything on. And then when I do sit down, not thinking like, oh, I have to get this out. Just like I'm a writer and it's going to come and it's okay. And like changing things up. Like I had a really clear view of what I wanted the books to be. And then that's not fully the case anymore. And like that was really hard for me to like be like, oh, well, I wanted this to happen. And like, it's okay if it didn't happen. Like I can always use that idea for another story.
Hmm.
So just I have a journal notebook that my friend got me and like just writing down ideas and like really just trying to keep like a pace is probably the biggest thing for me. Just like if I don't write it's okay, but I definitely like if I'm going a week and I haven't touched the computer, I think that's more me hiding from it than like because I definitely have time where I'm just scrolling through my phone and I'm like at least sit in front of the computer. Like maybe you'll want to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely tricky. But that's a great tip there because yeah, I remember it came up when I talked with Ria in one of the previous ones in previous podcasts where she talked about how like when she writes the initial outline, like 'cause she's a bit more of a plotter like myself, that it's okay if it shifts from that, but then to take those nuggets and like to save them somewhere because like you never know
Mhm.
when you'll be writing and you'll be like, oh, what was that idea, and you can just like pull it in and maybe modify a little bit. Yeah, definitely a great strategy there.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned that this is like your first non-school writing. Did you do any like creative writing in school, or because like when I went into this book, you had mentioned that, and I was trying to view it from that perspective. But honestly, I was kind of shocked in a way of like like this is really good. Like
Mhm.
I don't like not to yeah I don't know how to say that differently, but just to say like wow, I got inside the head of both these characters and I could feel what they were feeling, and like each of the moments like felt like it made sense. Um, like yeah, like so. Did you do any creative writing before this, or this is like really your first entry into that?
So, when I was in high school, my freshman year, I had thought that I was going to go more English. And my friend, well, he was more of like a crush at the time, was like, "Oh, I'm going into like film and media. Like, you should do that. That would be fun." And, being 14 and really liking a boy, I was like, "Yeah, fine. I won't take this creative class. I'll go do film." And my film teacher was like, came up with this competition that New Jersey and a few other of the states do called the 10-day challenge, which is in 10 days you have to create like a minute and 30-second like full story. You get on the first day a name, the second day you get a genre, and the third day you get like an item that you have to use in the film. And I remember originally I was just going to do camera and something came up and I had this idea and I told him about it and he was like, "Do you want to be the script writer?" And I was like, "Oh, that'd be like cool." And then through high school, I did that. So I did do like scripts and little challenges and stuff, and I did theater, but I hadn't sat down and wrote 130 pages or anything. But there was always an inkling in the back of my head that was like, it'd be really fun to write a movie, or like it'd be really fun to write a book. And like he did it. My English teachers always looked over my film to make sure that things made sense. But yeah, this was like the first time I picked up a computer because college I did coding and marketing, so nothing creative because I was trying to build a career, not like a pipe dream in a sense.
Hmm.
And now I was like, I like why wouldn't I pursue something that I love over funds and money?
Indeed. Yeah, well, I mean, definitely props to you for putting it down and to try because like I said, um, yeah, like I thought it was really well written, and it's interesting, and I guess I'll have to wait and see with your second book. At the time this recording is coming out shortly. At the time of the release, it'll be out for a bit. To see how you've learned and how you've progressed. And I guess that's a question for you is, you have this first book out now and you have the second one coming out and you're working through the third. How have you found looking back at those now has informed your future writing?
I mean, it definitely has. Looking back at my first book, like I love it so much. Like I talk about all the time. Like I don't think we'll ever be characters that I love more than Demi. Like she really was just somebody that like I put every piece of myself into, people that I knew, like situations that I had. And now writing into this, I look back and, I have Declan that I'm going with. And like there's just like I want people to know more about these characters. Like I want people to feel these characters and I want more of me in these characters, and that's really like the important part of me, that like I don't want people to just see like baseline surface level. I want people to pretty much be like, "Oh, this person's on the couch with me. Like I've met this person."
From a reader perspective, I felt like you did that, for better or for worse in some cases, because, like I said, definitely creeped out from the main antagonist, which is good because that's what potentially what you're going for at some level. Um, yeah, I guess one of the funny things that popped in my head was I believe last year you also bought a house, and some part of
Mhm.
me was thinking, I really hope that this wasn't inspired by like a real life experience in some way.
Real. No, yeah. When my husband read the book, he was like, "Do we have a room like that?" And I was like, "Wouldn't you like to know?" Like, but yeah, that was it was very, very cool because when we were looking at houses, I always liked unique houses and like having a bookcase that leads to a hidden room is something I feel like many readers and writers fantasize of. Like, oh, I'd love a little library. And I was like, what about like a twisted version of that? Like, you think about secret rooms, like, what if it's not great? Like, there's a room in my house or a wall in my house that like you don't really know, and he's a realtor, so he built his house so that it didn't look odd. Like nothing looks out of place. You wouldn't have seen that wall and been like, that's a little bit too short to follow the right hallway.
Indeed. Yeah, so I guess another question would be, you've got this series that you're working on. Have you dabbled in any other genres, or would you say like this is like the one that you're most gravitating to?
So I definitely have wanted to do fantasy and stuff. I just don't think like I'm made to write romance. Like I've tried, like when I did the second book, and I was like, well, let me take a break because it is heavy stuff. Writing about a serial killer, a serial kidnapper, it's heavy. But I like tried a little bit. I just don't think it's for me. There's something about like writing that psychoticness that like feels right, which sounds awful. Like I'm not a psychopath, but yeah, there's something about it where I'm like, I like the idea of like you don't know it's like you're getting a sneak peek into these people's heads,
Hmm.
and I almost want people to sympathize with them. Like, oh, you must have had such a hard childhood. But he didn't. He's just crazy.
Yeah, and yeah, it's definitely a point there of like um, of writing what works for you. I know it's come up a number of times on socials where I've seen authors ask about, or I guess aspiring authors ask where what should I write, and often it comes back to the question of, but what do you want to write? There's a certain element of, yeah, you could try to write for the market, but if your heart's not in it, it will show up. And it's hard to write a thing that you don't want to write. I think with this book, it definitely shows that you care about the subject matter, because yeah, the details that you're putting in, the way that you're thinking about things, and like how you're putting the different pieces around in the story, shows that you care about the story. It's not just like a random piece on the internet kind of thing.
I appreciate that. I'm glad that that shows.
Indeed. When you're looking at this story, you mentioned like the kind of like the movie, seeing it come out of your head that way. Did
Hmm.
you find that you wrote it sequentially, or did you kind of write as things come up and then piece the bits together? Because I know someone like myself, I tend to write like chronologically, so I know where my start is, where my middle is, and where my end is, and then I kind of weave those pieces together. Did you find that you went from that angle, or how did you go about doing that?
I definitely feel like I wrote from, like I said, I made the chapter names like, oh, where he meets her, how they meet, and then I wrote from there. There were some times where like something would happen to the end, and I was like, oh, I should hint at that. And then I went back to the beginning and added little clues to things, like the dog's name being Italian for key. Like I thought that was really, really cool, and him hinting like, "Oh, I would love to teach you Italian," and her being like, "I just hate him." Like, had you ever learned Italian, maybe you could have escaped a lot sooner than maybe now. Look at you.
Hmm.
So it was definitely fun to write that, and there were some things that I went back on, but I definitely wrote from chapter 1 to chapter 19 in order.
Nice. That's awesome. And that's funny. I didn't pick up on that. So I guess if you're watching this now, you got a little extra tidbit there for your reading experience.
Yeah.
Nice. With this next book coming out at the time of this recording, what does that look like in terms of do you have anything coming up as far as like talking about the book, or like what does your promotion cycle tend to look like as your books are coming out?
So, like I said, I'm kind of new to this, so I hadn't prepped at all for my first book. I just self-published, and then I was like, oh wait, I have to like get people to actually want to read it. But for the second book, I do. I've been on another podcast with somebody that I know kind of loosely, and he mostly does like stand-up like comedy and stuff. But he invited me back again, and then I do have some videos and stuff because I have obviously like made the cover and stuff like that. I'm trying to do, there's a author event in Hershey, PA that I'd like to go to that I did put applications in for. And then there's a few bookstores in New Jersey that I've been talking to about maybe like doing a little meet and greet because I do have my social media presence alongside of my author presence. So I was hoping maybe I could mix the two of them. But really just like winging it. I do have a friend that's in film that we were talking about doing maybe like a little trailer for either the first book or the second book, kind of up in the air, but he was definitely interested in it and not something that I think I'd be interested in. Just like a little short trailer because I think that could catch people's attention as well.
Yeah, I guess is there anything that you want to talk about the story or anything that you feel like people would want to know about you that may not be apparent?
Goodness. I don't really know. I'm kind of like new to this, so I feel like I'm very shy almost about my work. Where like I don't really know how to talk it up or like where I want to talk it up. Like I'm still freshly saying like, oh, I'm an author.
I can appreciate that. It's definitely an eye-opening experience. Like as I've been learning about it myself and talking with other authors of like how many things I didn't know before getting into this, and how many things are maybe easier than I had thought, and some things that are like way harder than I thought. Like for example, one of the things that seems to be fairly consistent for most authors is the marketing piece. That seems to be an area of struggle for a majority of authors. How have you found that from your perspective? Like you seem like you know what you're doing on socials. So
Thank you.
do you have any tips for other people who are trying to get their book out there, or what have you learned from that side of things?
So really coming from trends that are very much lip syncing or like of me and my couple and changing those trends into doing it for my characters, I've noticed helped. So like a new trend on TikTok being like, oh, I probably needed a hug, but I went to run instead. I recently did that from like my serial kidnapper's point of view, where like might have needed a hug, decided to steal the girl that I have been stalking for 8 months, which was very fun and like stuff like that, or like what's your favorite horror story? And it's like, oh, I got kidnapped by a man that I didn't even know existed. So finding trends and like learning how to put it towards my book rather than my personal life has been really fun and interesting. I think that's the niche that I'm falling into that I think I like most because it still feels more like me. Um, but also like I know a lot of people were telling me like, oh, for my second and third book to try to like send my books to publishers, and I was like, look, like this is my first project. Like as much as I'd love to, like I don't think I could handle a rejection letter on these three books. Like maybe for the next ones, and I was like, but these are already so close to my heart. And having them be like, oh, this is too dark of material, or like, oh, this is too sensitive. Like, I don't want to hear that right now. Like, this is exactly what I wanted it. It's perfect to me. And if nobody else reads it, that's okay. I'm proud of it. And maybe for other future ones, I think maybe I would go kind of more traditional and maybe reach out to that. But for right now, I mean, even 100 people read this book. That's perfect to me. If that's all it ends up being, I'm happy that 100 people got to hear my voice and how I wanted it to be.
Totally, and that's awesome. And it definitely is the great debate, I would say, with authors about self-publishing versus traditional publishing. But I think you got the nail on the head with that of like this story is important to you how it is, and if you pass it to a traditional publisher, maybe it wouldn't come out the same way, or even
Mm.
getting to that point, you'd have to deal with a lot of rejections. I know one of the authors I had, Annie Bennett, she talked about how it took, I think, 120 rejections before she got to her published book with a traditional publisher. So it definitely is is a challenge. But then at the same time, as you've experienced, from a self-publishing perspective, there are definite benefits of how, it sounds like you designed your own cover. You went through the
Mhm.
process fairly quickly through a series of clicks, and now your book is out in the world, and in a fairly short period of time in terms of book publishing. Yeah, so I'm happy to hear that you've gotten that many people to read your book. It's pretty cool that you've reached that milestone, and it may not sound like a lot, but 100 people is a lot of people. If you put 100 people in a room, that's a lot of people.
That's what I'm saying. My living room can only fit like maybe 20. So I'm already doing 5 living rooms, like
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I guess you mentioned TikTok a number of times. Where's the best way for if people want to connect with you, learn more about your book? What's the best way to learn more?
either via my TikTok or Instagram. I feel like Instagram does better at not hiding DMs and stuff. I have had a few people reach out on TikTok, and it's like you have to go through 3 tabs just to find requests. Whereas Instagram, I only have 3,000 followers on there. Like I'm pretty quick to reach out to. Same with Threads. So I think Instagram is probably better to contact me at, but TikTok is more of where my content goes, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Very cool. Well, yeah, like I said, I appreciate you taking some time every day to talk to me and share a little bit about your book and your story. I'll put links to the things that you mentioned down below, as well as your books coming out. But yeah, hope everyone has a good rest of your day, and keep writing.